Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com and today I'm here with Dan Blank. Hi Dan.
Hey, Joanna. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
No worries, it's great to have you on the show. Now, Dan helps writers grow their platforms and publishers grow their communities, and he has a new guide out soon. So today we're talking about email marketing, which is very dear to both of our hearts. Now, Dan, just start by telling us a bit more about your publishing and marketing background.
Sure. So what I do is I work with writers, I work with publishers, and it's really what I call the craft of platform. It's the craft of everything of having a writing career besides the writing. So it's really the idea of how do you discover who your audience is? The types of things that I really consider like the deep research, and these are often the questions I feel a lot of writers skip past. They skip past it right to social media because social media is easy and you figure, well, it'll happen magically. Then it doesn't. So I talk a lot about, I do courses, I do consulting. It's very much about reader discovery, understanding what messaging works for you, where you should be online, and really kind of how to connect one-on-one with people. Obviously, I love the idea of scale, but it's this idea of how things really tend to grow are that you resonate with one person, then another, then another, then another. And that's how these things actually build momentum.
Oh, absolutely. Now, email marketing is kind of one of those phrases, like we hear so much. So maybe you could just explain a bit more about email marketing. And you talked about connection there, but why should authors care about email marketing?
So email marketing is a horrible phrase because it sounds like you're basically spamming people. It's got the word marketing in it. We're all a little overwhelmed with email. I use that term because it's a known term. People know what it means. What I think is so powerful about email marketing is that there's a very direct connection, one-on-one, from you to someone who wants to hear from you. Why is email still important? It's because pretty much everyone checks their email. It's sort of like a telephone or in-person event. We can argue about, if it's on the rise or people are sick of it. As much as we complain about email, if we want to get something, we give them our email address. And even that act of doing it is a very trusting thing. We don't just give it out to anyone like we would have 15 years ago when we were just excited to get any email. So if I want to hear from you or want to hear from Seth Godin, I give that email and it's part of a trusting relationship. And I think that a lot of things authors have to realize is sort of like the circles of, the sphere of the onion. Who's close to you? Who wants to hear from you? And if they do, you want to have that direct connection. And email is a primary way to do that. That if you know at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, you're doing an interview on a radio show, or you've got a really big blog post coming out, you've got a book launch, if you send them an email, they will hear about it. And that's why it's so powerful.
No, absolutely. Now, some people will be saying, well, what about Facebook and Twitter and all of this social stuff? Why have email when you can have these other social mechanisms?
So a lot of reasons. For one is that people have different preferences. We all know people who don't like doing email. They won't give you their email address. They prefer to go to your blog, or they prefer to get a letter in the mail from you, or to find you on Facebook. So one is that you want to not be everywhere, but if it's a primary channel, be there, and knowing that not everyone's there. The issue with a lot of social media channels is that you don't own them. Facebook is amazing. You and I both know how much we love social media. But the problem with Facebook is that you don't control the message. You don't control what they allow you to do. And for certain aspects of Facebook, they keep changing the rules.
Yeah.
And as an author who you invest a lot of time because Facebook is an amazing platform, everyone's there, and they change a rule and suddenly you feel like, wow, I spent 3 years building that. That is my primary channel, my readers, and now I can't email them. Or even if someone has liked me and wants to hear from me, they won't display my updates on that person's page. It's a gut-wrenching feeling if you have forged a one-on-one connection, you've invested in Facebook, and they change that on you. And suddenly you realize, I don't have the control that I thought I had.
No, absolutely. So people will be now saying, well, how can I start a list? How do I get a list in the first place? Some people won't have any, much of a web presence at all. So what's your recommendation for actually starting an email list?
So from a technical side or a more practical person side?
Oh, both of them.
Okay. So we'll start with the more practical person side. One is, I find this a lot with writers, is that they're not kids. They're people in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, 60s, 70s. So when they're really venturing saying, I'm going to be a writer, It's a new identity. So what they often view is that this is something where I'm going to be. So their friends and their family and their colleagues have no idea that they're writing thrillers or that they're going to write a nonfiction book or a guide or a memoir. They imagine that their writing life are these beautiful, perfect strangers. And really how it works when you build something is you have to focus people that you already know on crafting that identity, on letting them know, giving them a choice if they want to hear from you about that. So often if you're looking to build a list, you've got to start from the center. You have to start from people who you know. You cannot expect them to sign up. You don't want to pressure them to. You would be amazed at how many people either might want to read what you're writing or they want to go on that journey with you, that they too are 48, mid-career. They always dreamed of doing something creative. Maybe it wasn't write a thriller, but they want to hear from you. They want to support you. And you give them that opportunity. You just say, hey, here's what I'm doing if you want to find out. Here's a link to simple forum, and I'll email you once a week or once a month. It's a very adult, respecting kind of relationship. So start from your center. And I hear again and again the stories of that, of how did you succeed? Well, I told my friends and they helped out and this thing. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger from there. On a purely technical standpoint, you want to use a service like MailChimp or Aweber. There are all these wonderful services that make it easy. They give you a sign-up form to put on a website or a blog or an email. They give you templates by which to craft the newsletter. They do all the technical stuff that none of us want to deal with about how to deploy it so it gets into Gmail inboxes or Yahoo inbox or AOL inbox if they still exist. And likewise, all the other stuff about how to subscribe, how to unsubscribe, dealing with spam, that sort of stuff. They really do make it very easy. And they start off, MailChimp, I think, when you're starting out is free. Aweber starts you out at $19 a month. So there are free solutions that are incredibly powerful, and they scale up. So as you grow, they give you more levels to kind of go up.
And I think that's important to remember is about the growth. So when I started my list, back when I started my site 5 years ago, I had nobody joined, or maybe 5 people joined in the first month. And then, and it grows over time. And I mean, I would say to people that if you don't start a list, and in fact, I put on my blog a few weeks ago a quote from an author who made it big on Amazon. And the number one thing that she regretted was not having a list sign up at the back of her book, because she sold 100,000 books and she didn't know who any of those people were. Whereas all of us authors can put that link at the back of our books and point people at our website. So I'm totally with you. I think this is absolutely critical.
One thing I want to add to that is I think a lot of authors, with anything platform-based, they tend to feel like, let me wait until something else is working. Let me wait till the book is done. Let me wait till it's published. And they figure, then I'll feel like an author, and then I can spend the time to do these things. And what I find again is exactly what you say, is that when that little serendipity does hit, they're not prepared for it.
Yeah.
And what they feel is a sense of regret that, wow, it would be great if 4% of those 100,000 people signed up because they like me and I want to connect with them. And if I'm writing the next book, I can connect with them. Or if I want to reach out to them for something, you want to set yourself up for success.
Absolutely. So I would say probably at the point where you are taking this seriously enough to sort out a website, for example, that would be when you sort out your list. Like, if you're having even a hub, it doesn't matter if you're blogging or not, I think, but you must have a list. And actually, if you have a book that's about to go out or is out, you should have a list.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's cool. So I guess other people will wonder, well, what do they send the list? Because some people are sort of paralyzed by this thing like, oh, now I've got 100 people, let's say even 10 people on my list. What do I do with them? So what do you recommend? And I mean, I think this differs between what the goals are, but maybe you could explore that.
There are a lot of different things you can send, and I do cover that in the ebook. My whole career, the big part of my career started with a newsletter. I was within a company. I sent out this newsletter to 10 people. It was a time when social media, digital was just starting out in like 05 or so. I sent to 10 people, and it spread really quickly. And my whole career has been from that email list. It's not an especially big list. But I'll say that what you want to often think, one way to do it, the way that I like to do it, is think about writing to one person. If you think about writing to all these people, you get paralyzed with fear. You kind of make it a little more vanilla. You're trying to please everyone. You're trying to sound professional. When you have a pretty clear sense of saying, you know what, my friend Donna really likes what I do, or I met this person and they really resonate with what I do. Like we're like that. When you sit down and think about how often should I send or what should I send, think about literally writing to that one person. You can change the voice. It doesn't have to be, hey, Donna, this is what I'm thinking. Maybe it's in a more article format. Maybe it's a series of links that you're sharing. Maybe it's an interview. But that makes everything so easy because in your head, you say to yourself, would Donna love that? Or when you say you have these questions in your head of, should I do it? So many people are afraid of figuring out how often to send. They think, I'll do it quarterly. And we'll say, let's talk about weekly or monthly. And they're like, whoa, I don't want to overwhelm people. And you think, how often would Donna want to hear from you? If you sent her a short email once a week, do you think that Donna would now feel that you've abused that relationship with her? It's a different way of framing the question of everything else about your platform. How often do you send an email? What do you write? Is it a big fancy template? Are there images? Or is it just a simple note?
Yeah, and I struggle with it all the time. I think everybody does. And on the Creative Penn, I started out doing like, you know, a PDF originally, like an e-zine thing, and then I did a full-on, you know, HTML template thing, and now I've gone back to a text email more regularly because so many people read on their mobile phone.
Yeah.
And that's feedback I got around mine, and I got a few people that said, oh, where's all the fancy formatting? And, you know, but basically more people were reading it when it was plain text. So that's probably one thing. And also I'd say as a fiction author, I really don't send out very often compared to my non-fiction side. I think non-fiction audience, you know, if you have more of a, you know, a helpful type of email list, it's easier, whereas fiction authors, often it's just, you know, here's my latest thing or here's my latest research. So what do you think about that?
I love the conversation between fiction, nonfiction, memoir, of what you can do with that. What I think is always interesting, or even more interesting about fiction, is understanding why do people read your books or books like yours? What doors are you opening? It's always to me about identity, whether it's a real identity or imagined identity, and thinking about what alignments do you have? Like, what is the shared viewpoint? What are the doors that you open that doesn't have to be about what you're writing? And like most things, social media or platform, it's often better if only a small portion of what you talk about is about promoting your own stuff. So if you think about, again, if you're meeting with your friend Donna, what would you talk about? Yeah, you might check in on your books or what you're reading, but what else is that kind of shared viewpoint? Was it a movie? Was it exploring a feeling that was captured in a book? Was it pulling out a scene from another book that is a similar kind of thing that you cover in your book? So really boiling it down to why people read, and that gives you a lot more ideas about, well, I'd love to write about that. And I know people would love to read about that. It gets over that hump of feeling like, I think a fear that a lot of writers and creative people have, which is, I'm desperately afraid of being seen as someone who's marketing or spamming you. That is their biggest fear because they're creating, and that's such a vulnerable thing to do. And they don't want to give anyone a reason to then come back and say, you've jumped the shark, you've gone too far.
No, absolutely. I think we all worry about that. So, one other thing, I guess, you know, we mentioned a bit about that we're not spamming people, we're not being scammy or anything. What are some of the rules around the kind of, you know, the anti-spam laws and privacy that people need to be aware of?
So one tip I'll put in front of this is that when you're asking people to sign up for a list, the fewer things you ask of them to provide, the more likely they'll do so. So when you ask for just the email, that's kind of the bet. You'll get the most signups that way. When you ask for email and name, some people feel like, no, and they, you know, you'll lose 10% of the people with that. When you ask for where in the world are you, or are you a fiction writer or not, or address or phone number, I have seen some crazy forums from like writers, and you're like, I'm like, are you now my accountant? You know, so much information they're asking for. So that's the first thing, and I think it aligns to the idea of privacy because you're making it easy. You're not kind of peeking up that red flag of saying, why do they want to know that? What I like about services like MailChimp and Aweber and Constant Contact and MyEmma, there's so many of them, is that they take care of these privacy laws. Basically, what tends to happen nowadays, if you use a service like MailChimp, they have a double opt-in. What that means when someone provides an email address, that person has to confirm that they want to get an email from you. MailChimp takes care of that. What they'll do is they'll put that name in there. They'll send them an email saying, hey, it looks like you want to sign up to Joanna's list. Are you sure? They click through a second time, and then they're good. And then if they want to unsubscribe, at the bottom of everything you send through MailChimp or Aweber or whatever you use is a one-click unsubscribe. It says, you know, all the official language says you want to subscribe, click right here. One click goes to a site, says, are you sure? You're done. So you as the writer don't have to manage that process at all.
Yeah, and I think that's important because we don't want people on our lists if they're unhappy with what we're talking about. So I remember right at the beginning when I had such a small list, and my first unsubscribe was kind of devastating to me. So everyone should be prepared for that. But essentially that person didn't gel enough with me to want to stick around. So we should embrace people leaving our lists as well, shouldn't we? That's not a big deal.
Absolutely. And then the way I have it set up, when people unsubscribe, they have the choice of saying why. And very often it's just like, I'm just so swamped right now, my inbox is full, or I go to your blog anywhere, I follow you on Twitter, or just my needs have changed.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I like that because it's just two human beings agreeing on something. I don't want to bug people. I want to, it's like real life. I want to have coffee with people who we have a wonderful conversation. That's all.
Yeah, and one big no-no from my perspective, I hope you agree, don't add people to your lists manually like that. It drives me crazy because I always sign up to lists with a specific email that's private, so I know when someone's signed me up because they've used the one that's freely available on my website. And if I get one of those, I get angry and I delete it, So would you agree that's a kind of no-no?
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's really almost offensive, Absolutely, I agree, yeah.
So don't do that. But otherwise, it's obviously, like you said, be yourself, not an issue. So tell us what people can find in your new guide.
Sure. So the guide is really taking you through from kind of nuts to bolts, beginning to end, about why this is important, the key things you have to think about, and really figuring out, how do you get people on the list? That's always a big thing. It's not just about, here's how you use MailChimp. There are so many services on the technical aspect how to do that. For me, it's always about, how do you resonate with people? So how do you figure out who are the readers for this? How do you set up the newsletter? Why do you think about frequency? What types of things can you put in there? And really giving a lot of examples about sign-up forms and different types of emails and different scenarios and what you might want to write about. Why would someone care about that? So it's always, for me, a very kind of human aspect, a practical aspect of resonating with people, coming together with them, and again, using it to kind of build momentum of, this is something that if you're going to be spending your time doing it, it should feel right to you and to them, and should be building in your writing career, not taking something away.
Absolutely. And where can people find you and the guides and your products and things online?
So my site is wegrowmedia.com, and up top of the navigation bar, you'll see the link for guides, and I teach courses. It's sort of all right there in the navigation. And that's where I put everything.
Fantastic. Well, thanks ever so much, Dan. That was great.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I appreciate it.